right, so let me turn it over to Martin. I just don't like this thing. He's not a guest speaker. He's really been our friend and great supporter. And I had some bad news driving out just before I got in the car to drive out. Think about the city of Las Vegas and Pahrump and Southern Nevada. We only have one person left because Jill Stefanos of Animal Kingdom just announced she's retiring and she sold her business. She was the only other bird rehabber we have in the area. So that only leaves Lisa Ross. You guys know Lisa. And she is looking to retire, right? So people like Lisa, like Jill, and like Martin have put their whole life into taking care of birds. And there aren't that many good left. There aren't that many of these saints left in our community. He's up in Cedar City, and I think he supports all of Utah, it seems like, right? And he started when he was your age. Okay? That's his story. And I'd like for him to tell you that story. And they're not just going to be satisfied with saving wildlife, because it's not just birds that they bring. They are doing this thing that I think they're totally nuts. They're taking this big property that was donated to them by the utility company, and they're also turning it into a community park. People from Cedar City can actually walk to that park. It's a nature park. It's amazing how beautiful that piece of property is now, what they have done. And I urge you, if you have the time to get up there, go take a look at that park. We had the privilege of spending an evening up there with music and marshmallows and all that stuff, just watching the sunset. They can't do it just by themselves, too. You know, get a hold of this, his story. This is a story of Martin, his birds. Contribute tonight, whatever you can, to help Martin and his project. Okay? So, like I said, I don't know how to say he's not a guest speaker. He's my friend. He's been, and Susan's here also. Thank you so much. Anytime he's one of these people that I can call on and say, can you help me with this? It's of course. And how long a drive is it?
4.5 hours.
One way?
One way.
So with these birds that you're gonna see, so it's not just, he's not running a zoo, okay? He's doing something really important. And while he's talking about the birds, pay attention, please pay attention to the relationship he has with these birds. To me, that's the special part. That's why these are, I kind of call savants in our population. So, okay, would you take it over?
Absolutely.
And we'll not bore you with slides tonight, okay?
Well, good evening. My name is Martin Tyner. I'm a master falconer. I'm an eagle falconer. I'm a raptor rehabilitator, raptor educator, raptor propagator. I know, it's kind of ridiculous. I was the curator of birds of prey at Busch Gardens in California for many years. I worked in the movie and television industry, training big cats and elephants and bears and sea lions and all of that kind of stuff. And I am the founder and CEO of the Southwest Wildlife Foundation. This is our wildlife rescue organization in Utah. And so we take care of a lot of critters, not just birds, but we take care of native Utah wildlife. And Doug asked me to come up and talk to you a little bit this evening about birds of prey, because that's kind of my specialty. Now, Doug told me I only had like about 45 minutes, and I says, well, Doug, I'd like to bring up my whole program, the slideshow called Birds of Prey of the West, and it takes about 2 hours. And he says, no, keep it under an hour. So that means just the birds. But I'd love to come back here sometime and do the whole show, because I think you guys would have a ball learning about all the different kinds of hawks and eagles and falcons and owls and condors and ridiculous stuff that all the birds of prey that migrate through here. Well, let me get to the critters. Now, I've been a falconer a very, very long time and a wildlife rehabber for a very, very long time. And my previous hawk was named Thumper. He was a Harris hawk, and he came out of my captive breeding program, and he literally hatched in my hands. he passed away last year at 29 years old. And so he was my dear friend, and you know, the average life expectancy for a hawk like that in the wild is 7 to 10 years, in captivity 15 to 20 years, and he was 29. So he was the oldest Harris hawk in the world when he passed away. Now, he will never be replaced, but I have a new Harris hawk. Instead of a male, I've got a female. She's been with me now for just a little over a month. She's my new baby, and her name is Belle. So let's go ahead and start with Belle. Hey, pretty girl. There's my little lady. Isn't she beautiful? Now this is Belle. The reason we call her Belle is she came out of a captive breeding program out of New Orleans, just north of New Orleans. And so she's my little Southern Belle. And again, she's only been with me for about a month. And in that month's period of time, we have done the whole process. You know, she flies free, she hunts with me now. She has now caught 7 jackrabbits and a cottontail. Now, that may sound a little bit harsh to some people, but the truth of the matter is that's what they do. You know, this is not a captive bird. Yes, you're wiggling your tail because you're happy. Yes, you are. You're such a sweetheart. Basically, that's what they do. They hunt. These are apex predators. You have to give them that opportunity. And so she and I go hunting every day. This morning she caught her first double. She caught a jackrabbit and a cottontail today. Now we bring the jackrabbits and the cottontails back to our wildlife rescue center, and we butcher them out for food for the injured wildlife that we care for. Basically, you have to feed them a natural diet. So we can't, as much as I would love to be able to go to the local grocery store and find dead rats in the frozen food section, they don't do that. So we have to order rats, mice, and quail frozen by the thousands to feed the injured wildlife. And so when these birds go out and they catch something, they get to eat their share, but the rest goes back to help feed the injured animals we care for. So she's a really good little gal. Now hawks and falcons are very, very different, and we're going to kind of demonstrate the differences to you because I brought a falcon as well. The first thing you'll notice with a hawk, she's bored. Are these people that boring? Is look at the feet, and what you'll see here, very, very big, very powerful feet, very large razor sharp talons, and so that's what she kills with. They kill with their feet. That is extremely powerful, and they literally will grab a rabbit and plant those talons all the way through the rabbit and bind to it. That's what they use to kill with. Now, hawks have longer legs than the falcons have. Falcons have much shorter legs, and the reason for the longer legs is she catches her food on the ground. And so she's hunting, she can hunt ducks and pheasants and rabbits and quail and all sorts of things along those lines, but she's trying to get them on the ground, not in flight. The falcons kill in flight, where the hawk tries to catch them on the ground. So she has to basically zigzag very quickly through all sorts of brush and in order to reach through the bushes to grab those rabbits. So she must have longer legs. Now she has a very big tail, and that tail that's the rudder she steers with, and it's extremely maneuverable. Look how much that tail moves. You can kind of wind her up. Yes, we can wind you up. How sweet. And that makes her extremely agile. And so she's very quick, but she's very agile to follow those rabbits and try to catch them. The hawk has shorter wings. You can see her wings only come about halfway down her tail. Short, round wings. And that makes her very quick, but with the long, slender wings are much faster at a top end. So she's quick off the glove, where the falcon isn't quick off the glove, but she is much more agile and a much more efficient hunter than what a falcon would be. Now she has brown eyes, and hawks can have brown eyes, blue eyes, gray eyes, red eyes, orange eyes, yellow eyes. Falcons all have black eyes. And so she has brown eyes, so that definitely makes her a hawk. Now the Harris hawk is a unique bird of prey in many respects. The Harris hawk is found in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Does not quite get this far north, though there have been a couple of reports of Harris hawks in the gorge. Now, I don't know why there would be Harris hawks in the gorge, because that's really a little too far north for them, but I've had a couple of reports that way. The Harris hawk is one of the only birds of prey in the world that hunts in groups like a pack of wolves. Most birds of prey, mama hawk does her hunting. brings food back to the nest. Daddy hawk does his hunting, brings food back to the nest. The Harris hawk, mom and dad work together as a team, and even last year's babies will join mom and dad this year to bring food back to this year's babies. You do not want to be a cottontail rabbit around Tucson, Arizona. You take off running because this hawk is chasing you, you outmaneuver the first hawk, there's a second one right behind it. You outmaneuver the second hawk, there's a third one right behind that. And so they hunt in these packs. It's just really amazing to watch. If you ever get down into the agricultural areas of southern Arizona, watch for the Harris hawks, because they hunt around the agricultural areas. Watch the power poles, and if you see one Harris hawk, you're going to see 3 to 5 more. And they'll be sitting up on the poles. And just park your car, get out your binoculars, and sit quietly and watch them set up the hunt. Because what the Harris hawk will do is they'll place themselves strategically around the field, and then one hawk will fly down off the pole and flush a rabbit, and the rabbit will take off running, and then everybody else comes in from different directions. They literally hunt like wolves. It's an amazing opportunity to watch these guys. They think, they're intelligent. Now these guys are not nearly as instinctive as many of the hawks are. The accipiter hawks, like the goshawk and the Cooper's hawk and the sharpshin hawk, very, very instinctive, and anything that moves they kill. But the Harris hawk on the other end of the stick thinks about everything, and they learn, and they're extremely intelligent, and that's what makes them so much fun to work with, because of their high degree of intelligence. And to take a young hawk out like this one and start its training process and just watch it figure things out. And in such a very short time, she has learned how to catch wild rabbits in a very short period of time. And to watch her try to chase that rabbit, and the rabbit zigs, and she goes, well, it went that way. And then you can just see the wheels turn in her little pea brain, going, okay, that's what a rabbit does, now how can I beat that? And every time they fly, they learn a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until they become extremely efficient hunters. Yes, you learn so much, don't you, sweetie? Now, many, many years ago when I lived in California, I had a Harris hawk just like this one, a nice big female. And that Harris hawk was named Sierra. And Sierra had a very, very sad story. She'd been stolen from her nest by some teenage boys. Now, a hawk raised by man has no fear of man. And that's a really bad thing. A hawk raised by man with no fear of man, we call that imprinting. And a hawk raised by man with no fear of man can be incredibly dangerous. Because a hawk raised by man with no fear of man, if they get mad at you for any reason, they will hurt you. Or a wild hawk, if it gets mad at you, it flies away. And so a hawk raised in captivity can be far more dangerous than one that is completely wild. And so I have this big female Harris hawk, very much like this one, that was stolen from her nest, raised by these teenage boys, raised inappropriately. She was imprinted. She was dangerous.
Even to you?
To everybody. She was dangerous. This hawk was not only imprinted, this hawk was horribly abused. She ended up with a broken leg. That's when she came to me, because I'm the guy that rescues the critters. Well, I could fix her broken leg, but I could not fix the emotional scars that she carried with her for the rest of her life. That hawk was so emotionally disturbed, its favorite thing to hunt was cows. Cows. We would go out on the desert, and if there was a cow within a mile, she had to go beat up a cow. She attacked horses. She attacked joggers. She attacked a farmer on his tractor. She had issues. Needless to say, we couldn't put her back in the wild because she'd hurt people. And so she stayed with me for the rest of her life, and she and I got along fine. We got along fine together, and she was with me for 16 years. Like I said, the average life expectancy in the wild is 7 to 10 years, so she had a nice long life. She was with me for 16. I think she was about 5, 6 years old when she came to me. So, now, I grew up in a small town in Southern California, a small town called Simi Valley. Everybody's snickering. When I was a kid in Simi Valley, there was 4,000 people. grew up in the middle of an orange grove. Seamy was a beautiful place to live. And everybody knew everybody. In fact, it was such a great little small town that some of you older folks here can remember the days when if you wanted to borrow your buddy's pickup truck, you said, hey, can I borrow your truck? Your buddy would say, sure, the keys are on the floor. You guys remember those days? Yeah, those are long gone. Well, that's the kind of environment I grew up in. And I had a little Toyota car, the back seat would fold down, and the hawk would just sit on a perch on the back seat of the car. So one day I took my hawk out to let the hawk go hunting. Big female Harris hawk just like this one. Took her out to the field, we went and chased a few rabbits, had a good time. Coming back, I stopped at the local store to buy something to drink. So I walked in the store and bought me a soda pop. As I came walking out of the store, I heard screaming. And I saw a guy bailing out of my car. So I went running across the parking lot. I get to my car, my hawk is on the ground next to the car. I pick up my hawk, I put her back on her perch on the back seat of the car. And I noticed that my keys had been picked up off the floor and put in the ignition. He tried to steal my car. Now, I don't know if he saw the hawk, didn't see the hawk, saw the hawk and thought it was stuff. I have no idea what was going through his mind, but can you imagine you jump into a strange car, grab the keys off the floor, put them in the ignition, having 8 razor-sharp talons puncturing the back of your neck, wings beating, and the most awful growl you've ever heard. There were quarter-sized drops of blood going down the street. I know he needed stitches. I'm going to assume that's the last car he ever tried to steal. My hawk got the nickname my feathered Doberman Pinscher. Well, I have been rescuing these guys. In fact, last April was my 50th anniversary as a volunteer wildlife rehabilitator. So I've been doing this for a very, very long time. 50 years, thank you. Thank you, sweetie. That was, you kept it on the plastic, you almost missed. Now see, hawks can't, yes?
I was going to ask you how you got her, or why you got her.
Why I got her. She came out of a captive breeding program just a little north of New Orleans, Louisiana.
And how old is she?
Right now she is about 27 weeks old.
Wow.
I can see she's young.
Yeah, she's a baby. She's 27 weeks old. Now they're full grown at about 9 weeks, as big as they'll ever get. And so this is full size, and like I said, she's out hunting and having a great time. But she was raised to be a falconry bird. And I'll explain that a little further along. Anyway, I've been rescuing these guys for 50 years, and such a good girl. And my sweet wife Susan, you got to see my beautiful wife Susan right here. Last February was our 40th wedding anniversary. I know, you're bored. Can you believe she put up with me for 40 years? She's an amazing young lady. Our very first date, I took her hunting with that hawk. I'm a romantic kind of a guy. Okay, so we get out to the field. I get my hawk out of the car, onto my glove, and as my then girlfriend but now wife approached, my hawk turned around and faced her and growled violently at her. Then my hawk turned back around facing me, lifted its tail, and pooped on her.
Oh.
That was our first date. She married me anyway. It's her fault. Well, my wife and I have written a book. If you like animal stories, this is 40 years of wildlife rescue stories and the wisdom of grandparents. And in the process of writing our book, I told my wife Susan, we need to put the story of the old Harris hawk in the book, Old Sierra. And Susan says, well, if you're going to tell everybody about our first date, you have to tell everybody about the rest of our first date. And I says, no, the story is funnier where we end the story where you get pooped on. And she says, no, you have to tell everybody about the rest of our first date. And I says, well, Susan, if you want to tell everybody about the rest of our first date, you have to write the story. So she did. So if you want to learn about the rest of our first date, you got to buy a book. And the profits from the sale of the book go to our rescue center to help us feed the animals. The eagle that's on the front cover here, his name is Scout. You'll get to meet him in a few minutes. I brought him with me. And Scout has autographed the book. My wife and I have as well, but Scout autographed the book. That's his footprint. So it's the only book autographed by a wild eagle. And like I said, the profits from the sale of the book go to our rescue center to help us feed the
And
animals.
it's a good book.
It's a fun read.
It's a good book.
If you like animal stories, it's a very, very fun read. Hot questions that I can answer for anybody. Yes?
Why the bells?
Why the bells? Now, where she catches rabbits, the sagebrush that we're going through is about shoulder height and incredibly deep and dense. And the rabbits go through that sagebrush. Now, she will chase a rabbit as much as 200 yards. And as she's chasing that rabbit a couple hundred yards, and she dives into the brush, and she catches that rabbit, now I have to find her. Okay? And so I head the direction that she has gone, and as she is as she's killing the rabbit and trying to pluck it to eat it. Does that make sense, guys? And so that helps me locate her in the really, really dense brush. So that's what the bells are for. Yes?
Are the males significantly smaller than the females?
They are. In all birds of prey, the males are approximately a third smaller than females.
All birds of prey?
All birds of prey. And so if you see a couple of hawks sitting on a power pole and one is obviously smaller than the other one, the smaller one's the male and the larger one's the female. Otherwise, the coloration is exactly the same. Now, there's some minor exceptions. The kestrel falcon, the male has blue shoulders and the female has the red shoulders. So there's some birds of prey that you can identify sex by color. But generally speaking, with birds of prey, like this Harris hawk here, this looks exactly like a male Harris hawk, other than her size, that she's quite a bit larger. Other hawk questions we can answer for you? Yes?
Do they have binocular vision? Do they look right in front of them, or do they look off to the sides and one eye?
No, they have binocular vision. All apex predators have binocular vision, and it's extremely important because when you're flying along and you're trying to catch a rabbit running on the ground, you're doing, 80, 90 miles an hour, zigzagging through the brush. If you don't have binocular vision, you do not have good depth perception. And if you don't have good depth perception, if you can't tell the difference between 1 foot and 3 feet, it's going to hurt. And so binocular vision is extremely important in all apex predators. Other hawk questions we can answer.
Why did it keep opening up its mouth before?
Well, basically because she's been wearing her hood since about 2 o'clock this afternoon when I left. And so she's just stretching because she had her hood on. Now this is a hood, and this is an extremely important piece of equipment. Basically, all of the birds that I brought with me today have incredible vision. And a lot of movement drives them nuts. And so this is why when you see horses in the sea, they have blinders to keep all that peripheral movement from frightening them. Well, the hawk is even more intense. And so a lot of movement when transporting, especially if they're not used to being transported, you can take the hood, you put it over their eyes, they can kind of close their eyes and relax and say, oh, I'm safe. Because there's, what I can't see can't hurt me. You had a question?
Is there a certain limit of how much they eat every day? Is that
Yes. Yeah, basically this is how it works, guys. Even though Belle is a very sweet little girl, and she's doing absolutely wonderful with me, and we just absolutely adore her. Yes, we do. We absolutely adore her. That's not the reason she comes back to me. The reason she comes back to me is because she's an extremely intelligent, opportunistic predator, and she's looking for the easiest meal. And she learns that if she follows me, I will flush out rabbits for her to catch. And if she doesn't catch a rabbit, she flies back, lands on my glove, I feed her anyway. So this is the hunter, and I'm her dog. And so she has to have a measured amount of food because she has to be hungry. If she's not hungry, she's a couch potato. If she's not hungry, she'll just go find a nice tree to sit in until she is hungry. And so we do control her food, and she gets about 6 to 7 ounces of animal a day. Now notice I didn't say meat. I said animal. And you guys can come and sit down if you like.
They're in between classes.
Ah, okay.
Oh, I just got him.
Yeah, so she eats animals. Meat is not good for them. They have to eat whole animals. They have to eat the fur, the bones, the feathers, the brains, the intestines. They eat the whole animal, and that gives them a balanced diet. And so we don't ever just feed them meat. Meat is completely inappropriate. Other hawk questions before I bring out the falcon? Yes?
The Harris hawk is a generalist, isn't it? Habitat generalist?
Well, the
Hawk.
Harris hawks are very specific.
Okay.
This is why we don't. The red-tailed hawk is a generalist because the red-tailed hawk, we have red-tailed hawks from the Pacific to the Atlantic, from Canada to Mexico, and they live in virtually all environments. The Harris hawk is exclusively southern desert saguaro, bordering agriculture.
Was the Cooper's hawk the generalist?
The Cooper's hawk, yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, she saw her reflection in my glass. Remember I told her how smart she is? Incredibly intelligent. She just saw something in my glass, and she says, I just saw another hawk. But yeah, the Cooper's hawk. But the Cooper's hawk nests very specifically. They have to have a water source, and they have to have basically some large mature trees, and they really like poison oak underneath the tree.
Poison oak?
They do. Cooper's hawks love to have poison oak under the trees. And so all the foothills that you see them, you know, anytime you can find a Cooper's hawk nest, there's usually poison oak underneath them. But they will nest around neighborhoods as long as they've got big mature trees in order for them to nest. But yeah. Other
And
hawk questions?
what's the Harris hawk conservation status?
The Harris hawk populations are stable. The problem that we have is habitat destruction. You get down into the Sun Belt, and people are building houses. And so the Sonoran Desert region, which is home to these guys, is slowly being eaten away by development. And so a good example of why this is so important to be kept as a falconry bird, the peregrine falcon is a great example. The peregrine falcon, during the late 1960s, there was only thought to be about 4 dozen pairs of Venado peregrines left in North America. Now, DDT is what wiped them out, okay? Falconers such as myself, we brought all of our peregrines together we had in falconry, created a breeding project called the Peregrine Fund. Since the early 70s, we have raised more than 4,000 peregrine falcons and returned them back to the wild. The peregrine falcon is the first animal to be removed from the endangered species list. And so, as we continue to damage Harris hawk habitats, having these birds in captive breeding programs, in the hands of falconers, these guys have a much longer life, they're great for education, and that's actually one of the key things here, guys. I cannot allow you to see the animals that I rescue. You can't come to my house, and you can't walk through my facilities and see all the injured hawks and eagles and things at my home, because we do not want to acclimate them to humans. Does that make sense, guys?
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm doing an educational program, I don't bring out rehab animals. It's illegal, and I wouldn't want to anyway. And so the animals that I bring and do these shows are my personal animals that are my falconry birds, and so they're much better handled, they're much more used to people, and on top of that, they get to go hunt and fly and hunt free, just like a wild hawk does, but we still have available for all of our programs. And so Belle is our newest wildlife ambassador for our wildlife rescue center. So,
Beautiful.
any other hawk questions before we? Yes.
How long does it take for it to hatch? Like the period?
A hawk like this takes about 28 to 30 days, depending on the incubation
And does
temperatures.
it vary between different species of birds, obviously?
Well, basically, the larger the bird, the longer the incubation, the smaller the bird, the shorter. Yes.
I have a question. Does Scout bring food to the dinner table like Belle does?
Scout does bring food to the dinner table, but here's the problem. Scout is very big, and he's not nearly as agile, not nearly as efficient. So, you know, she'll catch up like 100 rabbits this year, and Scout will catch 2 or 3. Because they're so big, and they just don't have the maneuverability. And so the eagles are primarily eat roadkill. They scavenge more than they hunt because they're so big.
So your hawks are your best hunters.
The hawk, by far, she will be my best
How
hunter.
how does a falcon compare to them?
The
As far as bringing in the dinner?
Well, the problem it's up in Cedar City is all of the, because they hunt birds, and all of the duck ponds no longer have water in them. The alfalfa fields no longer have pheasants. And so we fly the falcon. The only thing we have available is domestically raised pigeons. And so we fly the falcon on pigeons. And that's not really hunting, does that make sense? But it does give the falcon the opportunity to fly, and to fly thousands of feet in the sky, and to fly very naturally, and to hunt a very challenging quarry anyway. And so she gets her exercise, which helps to maintain her mental stability.
That much food is disappearing on the falcons?
Well, basically, in the Cedar City area where I live, all of the alfalfa fields have been, they're being
Houses?
subdivisions.
Okay.
And the farmers are no longer filling the stock ponds because they don't have the livestock, and so the ponds are empty.
Okay.
And so the habitat for pheasants and ducks in Cedar City has degraded horribly in the last 20 years. So that's part of the habitat problems we have to deal with. Yes?
How do you communicate with birds? Is it vocal or hand signals, like when they're hunting?
Well, the truth of the matter is, she tells me what she wants. Now, again, I'm her dog, and I'm also her portable perch. You know, I walk out to the desert, she sits on my glove, and she's completely free, and she kind of comes and goes to the glove at will. And as I'm going through, rabbits take off running, she'll go try to catch them. If she doesn't catch them, she flies back to my glove and starts looking around for the next one. And that, there is, it's a team effort. You know, I am watching her signals, I am learning from her, I'm trying to understand what her needs are, and at the same time, she's watching me, she's learning from me, and she knows that the better the two of us work together. Now, I do have a whistle, and if I blow the whistle, that's guaranteed there's gonna be food right here. Period. Hear the whistle, there's food. Other than that, there'll be food occasionally. And so if she comes back to the glove, every once in a while there'll be a little piece of food for her on the glove. And that kind of encourages her, that intermittent kind of encourages her as well. But it really, it's a partnership. When I'm working these animals, I don't own them. In fact, to be honest with you, I don't own them. I don't man them. I don't possess them. You know, it is strictly, once she leaves my glove, there's no way in the world I could ever bring her back. And so it's a matter of me working with her to demonstrate that I'm a really good dog. She keeps me.
Could she survive if she decided that she wasn't coming back? Could she survive with those bells?
Well, actually, these bells are actually, there's a little button here that you can just pull this tab and
She can take them off.
and the bell falls off. And on this little leather anklet, the straps that are on her, she can just pull those right out. And so when she's flying free, she is very capable of removing everything but the leather anklet, and the leather, since it's leather, it rots off in about 3 or 4 months.
Oh, okay.
And so all of the equipment comes off. So,
Have you ever had one that didn't come back?
well, when flying them in falconry, no. I've had birds, I had a falcon that was caught by a golden eagle, killed and eaten. I had a Harris hawk like this, caught by a coyote that was killed and eaten. I had a situation where I was out flying one of my falcons, and it landed on a power pole, and a bunch of guys out rabbit hunting shot it. But as far as just flying and not coming back, no.
How frequently do you take them out, and like how far do you have to go? Because you're saying, you know, the habitat near your community is degrading.
Well, again, for her, I've got sagebrush fields about 3 miles from my house.
Okay.
And so we have good rabbits that we can let her fly. We try to fly them 7 days a week during the hunting season. Hunting season September through February.
So you have to work within the hunting season?
We have to work within the hunting season. I cannot go hunting outside the season. And so we have 6 months. And in that just like before I came here today, she and I were out, and we were out hunting rabbits, and she caught a cottontail and a jackrabbit this morning. So it's very important to give them their exercise. Any other questions before we bring up the next bird?
I think I've read you have the same limits as a regular hunter, right? Or is it different?
It's a little bit different in
Lower,
that
isn't it?
we can take, I know, sweetie, you can work. We can take both sexes, so where you can only take rooster pheasants. You can't tell the hawk,
Oh.
no. You gotta leave the females, the hawk doesn't understand that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
Or isn't interested in that.
yeah, and so we have some minor differences, and my pheasant hunt is from September to February. The pheasant hunt up in Utah is 10 days, and so we have a longer season. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But the success ratio is much lower. Well, pretty girl, let's put you back and let's bring up the Prairie.
What was the head thing down?
Oh, this basically when the hood goes on, she just kind of goes, okay,
Oh, all right.
it's nap time. Yes, Scott, we'll get you out in a minute. Now, the next one I'm going to bring out is a falcon. It's a prairie falcon. It's our native desert falcon. And her name is Cirrus. Come here, sweetie. Come here, pretty girl. And she's absolutely beautiful. Yes, you are. You're such a pretty girl. People see how pretty you are. Isn't she beautiful? Okay, the prairie falcon is our native desert falcon. It is similar in size to the peregrine falcon. The peregrine falcon is the endangered species. This was never endangered. The prairie falcon is you're in prime prairie falcon habitat here. All the little cliffs and mesas. Yes, thank you for keeping it on the plastic, sweetie. All the little cliffs and mesas that we have around here. I bet I could spend an afternoon driving this area and find 10, 15, 20 prairie eyries. And an eyrie is a cliff building, a cliff nest. And so they don't nest in trees, they nest in holes in cliffs. And like I said, the falcon, look at those feet on her. Now, they're long, skinny toes. She doesn't have the physical strength the hawk has in her feet. They're more for catching. They're like a baseball mitt. They're for catching things that fly. And so she has very long, skinny toes. Look at her legs, how much shorter those legs are. Very short legs. Now, she had long legs like the hawk. Now she will hit ducks, pheasants, and pigeons at 200 miles an hour. At 200 miles an hour, if she had long legs like the hawk, the legs would break. She has to have short, thick legs in order to withstand that. What you're looking at here, guys, is the fastest animal that's ever lived on this planet.
Why does everybody say the peregrine's the fastest?
Okay, because they didn't qualify it correctly. Large falcon. Peregrine falcon, prairie falcon, gyr falcon, sacred falcon, all of the large falcons are built the same. Their terminal velocities and dive are the same. And so, since the peregrine is the most noted, famous of the group, they say, well, the peregrine is the fastest bird animal that's ever lived, and the correct statement is large falcon is the fastest animal that's ever lived. And so she is very much a large female falcon. Yes, you are, huh, sweetie? Hi. Yes, I know. Now, the prairie falcon differs from the peregrine in a lot of respects. The peregrine's darker on the back and lighter on the front, and the peregrines, all falcons have a mustache. The peregrine has a very thick mustache that actually covers the whole head, but they have the black eyes. The bone in the center of the nose that you can see right there, that little bone in the center of the nose breaks up the air so they can breathe at high speed, because like I said, she can dive at 200 miles an hour. And as you can see, her wings are pointed.
Goodness, she's a ham.
Yes, she is. She's really a sweet little girl for a prairie falcon. Now let me qualify that for you guys. The prairie falcon, Falcon mexicanus, the Mexican falcon. The peregrine falcon, Falcon peregrinus, the gentle falcon. We've renamed the prairie falcon though. We call them Falco horribilis. The horrible falcon. And the reason we do this is the prairie falcon is by far the most aggressive and violent and temperamental and difficult falcon to work with. This is the most dangerous bird I brought with me today, is the prairie falcon. Prairie falcons have a tendency of throwing fits and tantrums, and they're just, most falcons won't go anywhere near a prairie falcon
Do you hear what he said?
because of their personality.
Just
And
about the time you said that,
she says,
she
yes,
just-
I did, and I agree with him completely. I do, I agree. Now, this is actually one of the best prairie falcons I've ever had as far as her personality goes. She really is a very sweet animal. Many years ago, I had a female prairie falcon, just like this one. Again, the females are a third larger than the males. I had a female prairie falcon just like this one, and she was the worst bird I've ever worked. She was such a terrible animal to work with, I named her Horrible. Because she was horrible. Horrible was so aggressive. The only way you get Horrible to eat was I'd have food right here in the glove for her. I'd have to pinch her toes so she thought the food was biting her, and then she would attack the food viciously. Otherwise, the only thing she would do is look me square in the eye and scream at the top of her lungs. She was horrible. Horrible was so aggressive that I would take her out on the desert, all of this would come off, and she would fly thousands of feet in the sky, watching me to see when I was going to flush a duck, a pheasant, or a pigeon for her. Well, one day she was up 1,000, 2,000 feet in the sky, and a golden eagle flew out across the desert about 100 feet off the ground. Horrible rolled over and went into her death stoop. She hit that golden eagle at 200 miles an hour in the head and knocked the eagle unconscious.
Did it survive?
Yes. She killed a red-tailed hawk more than twice her size. If there was another bird within 20 miles, she would either kill it or she would drive it out of the valley. She was horrible. Well, I got Horrible raised. I got Horrible flying. I got her physically fit. I got her hunting. I got her back in the wild. And I was so glad when she was gone. She was horrible. The next year I ended up with a little male falcon that I was working with. And the male was doing very, very well. And we were just starting its training out on the desert. And part of the training that we do is we have a leather sack with leather wings. It's kind of a leather pigeon. That's their toy. And we teach them to chase that. And so I was out on the desert for the very first time. And we had the little male falcon. We turned the little male falcon loose. He flew off my glove and was circling about 100 feet over my head, waiting for me to bring out his toy. And all of a sudden, I spotted a little tiny pin speck, thousands of feet in the sky. It was a big female falcon. And the big female falcon has just rolled over and started its death stoop. Well, she's going to kill my new little falcon. So I grabbed the toy, threw the toy to the ground. My little falcon flew down, landed on his toy. I dove over the top of him as this big female falcon tries to fly through me to kill him. Well, she deflects off my back, lands about 10 feet away from me, looks me square in the eye, and screams at the top of her lungs. It was horrible. And it was horrible. Horrible recognizes my truck. And for 3 years, every time I'd go out on the desert to exercise either one of my birds or one of my rescues, I would have to bring a sacrificial pigeon for the falcon goddess. Because within 5 minutes of showing up out on the desert, Horrible would be right there. And I'd throw one of my really good 500-mile racing homing pigeons, and she'd chase that pigeon out of the valley. And then I could exercise my birds. Well, the good news is Horrible has moved to the next valley over. She's been raising babies now for about 10 years.
Wow.
She's a really good mom. So the process that I've just described here works really, really well, unless the bird is horrible. Falcon questions that I can answer for you.
Are her offspring thugs?
You know what? I avoid them. I don't want another one. Prairie Falcons are bad enough.
Are you gonna let this one loose then eventually?
Well, actually, here's the problem with this one. This is the sweetest little Prairie Falcon you'll ever see. Which basically means she doesn't have the genetic instincts to kill like she needs to do. They need to be mean and nasty and violent and aggressive in order to survive in the wild. Does that make sense? And so usually I fly them for a year, maybe 2, and then I put them back in the wild, and we train a new one. And this little gal right here, the truth of the matter is, she's a terrible hunter. She really is. And
But
even though
she's beautiful.
She is beautiful. And she's a really, really good wildlife ambassador. And so I have wanted to put her back in the wild for the last couple of years. And every time I go to put her back in the wild, I just look at her and going, you won't survive. You just won't. And so what I have done is this spring I went out and got a little male prairie falcon. And his name is Piper. And he is doing very, very well. And he's a very good hunter. And he's a very good flyer. And we're having a great time with him. And basically when I got Piper, I put him in the chamber with her and she raised him. Does that make sense? And so she raised him. Now once he's full grown, they become really obnoxious to their parents and you have to separate them because the parents will drive them off. And in a chamber, she can't drive them off. Does that make sense? So we have to separate them, and now Piper's with me, and we're flying Piper, we're exercising him, and and giving him lots of opportunities to fly and to hunt. Well, in a couple of years, Piper will be sexually mature, and I'm going to put the two together, and I'm going to see if we can have a breeding project of prairie falcons, and instead of basically raising one prairie falcon every year or 2 and returning it back to the wild, I will be raising 3 to 5 baby prairie falcons every year and putting them back in the wild. Does that make sense? And so with this pair, they still get their exercise, they get to fly, still get to be wild, but hopefully we'll have a good little breeding project going, just like the Harris Hawk Game breeding project, and we'll be able to put more prairie falcons back. And that's kind of the goal. Other questions?
Where did you get the mail from? Did you go out?
The male was from the wild. And basically every spring I go up, I do my nest counts. I rappel off cliffs and I go into, and we put bands and we retrieve eggshell fragments and prey remains and all of that kind of scientific stuff. And with my permits, when I find a nest that has more babies and mom and dad are having a terrible time feeding them, I can, with my permits, pull a young, take the burden off the parents, and raise it up, fly it for a season or 2, use it as an educational bird, and then put it back in the wild. And so he is from the wild, and so he and she will hopefully be good parents and raise a whole bunch of baby prairie falcons for the next 20 years, and we'll put those back in the wild.
How will they adjust being raised from bird in captivity to in the wild?
Well, basically, we let mom and dad raise them till they're pretty much full grown, and then we put them in what we call a hack station, which basically I've got people with property, thousands and thousands of acres, and we put about a 4-foot square plywood box with wood dowel bars around it so they can see out, and we put them in that box. They get fed in the box, and after about a week or so of being in the box, we open the box, but we continue to put food, and so they have basically guaranteed food until they leave. Does that make sense? And this is what we did with the peregrines. We brought the peregrines in, we raised up the peregrines, and the way we put the peregrines out in hack boxes so that they will have an opportunity to fly and they have guaranteed food until they go on their migration. And that is the process. Now, please understand, guys, 80% of all birds of prey don't survive the first year. So the prairie falcons that I hack out, 80% of them will not survive. And that's just the way it is with Mother Nature, and I can't change that. But we can put enough birds back, like with the peregrine, to actually increase the populations.
Have you ever had any just decide not to move on and just hang out in that hack box?
Well,
perpetually?
basically, they're actually hardwired in their brain to migrate.
To migrate, okay.
I mean, the Cooper's hawks that we have here, they go to Argentina. I mean, they go to Chile, South America. The Swainson's hawks that we have here, they go to Argentina. And the parents migrate first. The parents basically, the kids are really obnoxious to their parents, and about, mid-August or so, the parents are sick and tired of the babies badgering and being belligerent, stealing from them, and mom and dad migrate, and then the chicks usually migrate 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. Does that make sense, guys? And they're hardwired to go there, and we don't really understand the process. And so the prairie falcons we have here, they actually go east. They go to Kansas and Oklahoma, and then they come back at the end of winter into Nevada and Utah. So they have a weird migration. The last falcon question before we bring out the eagle. Are you done, sweetie? Are you my baby girl?
She's gorgeous.
You are. She is very pretty.
I have a question.
Yes.
You used a word that happens between the young and the parent. I think it was the young and the parent. And somehow they don't like one another, or?
When you are an adult hawk, falcon, or so on, when you have the babies hatch, they're very competitive in the nest. And basically, the strongest and the most aggressive eats first, and the weakest and the least aggressive will oftentimes starve to death in the nest. Does that make sense? And that's the way it is with all birds of prey. Now, let's say there's plenty of food, everybody grows up. So you got 3 or 4 babies. 3 or 4 babies now, the babies start to fly. They know the food source is mom and dad. Mom flies down, catches a small bird. The babies will come down and beat the hell out of their parents and steal the food. And mom and dad will put up with it for a while, but after a while, they're sick of it. It's just like when your teenagers grow up and you go buy a motorhome and you migrate. It's kind of the same deal. You gotta get away from those kids. And that's what the parents do. They migrate out, and the babies are left to sink or swim. And in fact, this time of year is when I get the non-survivors. When I get the young birds of prey that are doing very, very poorly, that haven't been able to feed themselves. Well, actually, we're about to the end of it now. That usually starts about mid-August, when I start getting the young birds of prey that aren't feeding themselves well enough. And then we feed them back up and get them strong and healthy and put them back in the wild, give them another shot. That's all I can do. So then they migrate out, they go wherever they go. And so that's the same with all birds of prey. You know, they're only with their parents for a certain amount of time, and then the parents want nothing to do with it anymore. And in most cases, a young bird of prey comes back to the nest the next year, the parents will drive them off. Because they don't want to have anything to do with the kids, because they got a new clutch of eggs and a new group of babies to raise. Does that make sense, guys? And so it's a pretty tough life. The first couple of years with all of these birds is really tough. And this is why 80% of them do not survive the first year. You know, everything's learned.
So if you guys think it's easy to go out and hunt with these birds, we have a couple of young people that wanted to go out with Martin with their cameras. After about 10-15 minutes, they quit and came back. It's so hard out there.
It's pretty rugged terrain that I get out there. Now, the hoods that you saw on the birds, I make those. I make my own equipment. That's part of the art of falconry. Now, what falconry is a very ancient form of hunting. It started more than 4,000 years ago. Started in China, and 4,000 years ago, if you lived in a small village in China, you could have nothing that could be considered a weapon. No bows and arrows, no spears, no swords, nothing you could hunt with. And so there was usually some old guy like me in most small villages that was trained in falconry, and he would take his hawk or falcon like these guys, and he would go out to the fields and he'd hunt ducks, pheasants, and rabbits to bring meat back to the village. And that's where falconry began. In fact, falconry is such an intimate part of the human experience that the United Nations has declared falconry as a World Heritage Activity. Because it's one of very few relationships between man and wildlife that is considered mutually beneficial. Because the birds are allowed to be free, and it's up to the bird whether they come back or not. And so that's what makes falconry truly remarkable. Now I make my gloves. This is one of my gloves that I make. All the stitching on this glove, this is not sewing machine, this is all by hand. The glove is made of elk skin, and so it's very soft, it's very pliable. I've got short stubby fingers, and so when I make my own glove, they fit me like a glove, which is a good thing. Now, my beautiful wife Susan, she gets very nervous when I'm handling eagles, because she knows the damage that an eagle can do. And so my wife Susan went out one day and bought me a commercially made glove, specifically for eagles. Eagle falconry glove. Now it is, instead of cowhide where it's soft and pliable, instead of elk where it's soft and pliable, this is cowhide. And it's very, very stiff. And it's very uncomfortable. And it fits me wonderfully. Okay? Now, I have been married for 40 years. And I learned a very long time ago that when your wife buys you a present, you use it. I'm a really smart guy. And so this is the glove I use for my eagle. And birds are very particular. They get very used to a piece of equipment. They hate change in any way. In fact, the hawk and falcon wear the same size hoods, but they're actually tailored to each bird individually. And if I take the hawk's hood and put it on the falcon, she will just throw a tantrum like you wouldn't believe, because that's not her hood, and she only wears her hood, and that's very much the way they are. And my eagle is used to this glove, so that's the glove that we use for it. Now, rule number 1, guys, never stick your head in a box with a wild eagle. I do it all the time, but I have to. But please don't do this at home. Yes, how big? That's why you put your head in the box with a wild eagle. A little bit bigger. This is a golden eagle. His name is Scout. He is 18 years old. He is a dear, dear friend of mine. Shall we start from the bottom and work our way up, big guy? Look at these feet. Okay, 600 pounds per square inch of crushing power in those feet. He can drive those talons through my glove and crush the bones in my hand. It's really good. He likes me. We do appreciate that. My eagle has over 7,000 feathers. 7,000. Now, there are many native people around the world that believe that if you say your prayers with an eagle feather, the eagle feather will carry your prayers to God. Well, he's got over 7,000 feathers, so I'm in really good shape. All 7,000 feathers only weigh approximately 2 pounds in weight, so they're very light. Of course, the bones of birds, their bones are hollow, so his entire skeletal structure, again, only about 2 pounds in weight. Yet there's a portion of my eagle's body that represents half his total body weight, and that's keep it all plastic, sir. Thank you, I appreciate that. Half his body weight, now get comfy. There's my boy. Half his body weight is found right here in the pectoral muscles. These large muscles are the motors that he uses to drive that 6-foot wingspan that allows eagles to fly where hawks and falcons cannot. Where eagles have been spotted at altitudes greater than 30,000 feet. And this eagle can comfortably soar in a 40-mile-an-hour wind, which would ground a hawk or a falcon. And of course, the eyesight of an eagle is legendary. Let me tell you truly how well an eagle can see. Here is an 8-pound creature, he weighs 8 pounds. An 8-pound creature with eyes larger than yours. Not only is his eyes larger, my eagle can see approximately 8 times further than you can. But you and I, we get a pair of binoculars, we can see 8 times further. Well, not only does he see 8 times further, he has 6 times the number of light-sensitive cells, the rods and cones in the back of the eye than we have. So everything he sees is 6 times clearer. This eagle can spot a jackrabbit 5 miles away. And he does. For just like the hawk and falcon, all of this comes off, he flies free. He goes thousands of feet in the sky, he flies with the wild eagles. And out north of town, he'll fly the ledges north of town, you look up on the cliffs and you see 2 or 3 eagles soaring together and you go, I think that's my eagle. But it's a little hard to tell because they're so far away. And you always have to wonder what they're talking about. To see my eagle cruising with his friends, I can see my eagle looking over to his buddies and saying, watch this, I have a trained human. All I have to do is drift out over that guy's head, and he'll run out to the desert with a stick, hitting bushes, flushing out rabbits for me to catch. And I will. Now, if there are no rabbits to be found, and it's time to go home, I can blow my whistle, and my eagle will fly back and land on my glove for food. Or I have his toy. I have his leather sack, and I can tie food on his leather sack, and I can blow my whistle, throw his toy out of the ground, and my eagle will go into a wonderful dive. Headlong, vertical, about 145 miles an hour, and he will kill the leather sack, which is convenient. One day my eagle got a little confused. Thousands of feet in the sky, no rabbits to be found, it was time to go home. So I blew my whistle and threw his toy out on the ground, and my eagle went into a wonderful dive. Headlong, vertical, 145 miles an hour. It was impressive. But it became apparent very quickly he wasn't going for his toy. He was coming for my arm. When I woke up, I was 6 feet back, laying face down in the dirt, with my eagle standing next to me, looking down at me to say, why are you laying there? I had a long talk with my eagle that day about how I could not withstand the impact of an 8-pound bird at 145 miles an hour, and I would appreciate if you never do that again.
Was that Bud?
That was Bud. He dislocated my shoulder.
Wow.
And damaged my back and knees. But see, that experience has given me knowledge. I have a knowledge that none of you have. I have an absolute knowledge of exactly what is going through the mind of a jackrabbit just before an eagle kills him. I don't recommend it, but it's mine. Well, the exciting news is our local electric company, Rocky Mountain Power, has donated to our volunteer group 22.6 acres, about $1 million worth of property in Cedar City, Utah, to build a permanent wildlife rescue facility and a nature park for the children of Utah. And so that's our big project that we're working on. And when the property was donated to us, I thought it would be very appropriate to do a property dedication ceremony and to invite the Paiutes are the native people that live in the Cedar City area, and to have their spiritual leader was named Mr. Clifford Jake, and to have him do a blessing. Well, this is going to be a little complicated. You see, the Paiutes do not like to speak their language in front of non-Paiutes, and the Paiutes believe that their religion is sacred, and they do not like to do religious ceremonies in front of non-Paiute. And I understand that completely. And so I had to make a presentation before the Paiute Council. And so I made a presentation before the Paiute Council. They came back about a month later, and they said, well, Mr. Tyner, because of what you do with the rescue of wildlife, and that the property is for the education of children, we will give our spiritual leader, Mr. Jake, permission to do a blessing. November 11th. Foot of snow on the ground, miserably cold. I didn't think anybody would even show up. Well, much to my surprise, about 100 people from the community came up to the nature park property. Mr. Jake was brought by his grandson because he was in his 80s. We cleaned off the snow in an area for Mr. Jake. He laid down his blanket, his eagle feathers, his smudge pot, his juniper branch, all the paraphernalia that he uses for his prayers. And he had us stand in a big prayer circle. And then Mr. Jake started the prayer. So the prayers were to be done as a whisper, because their religion and their language is sacred, and that's just fine. When Mr. Jake finished the prayers the first time, Mr. Jake called me into the prayer circle and asked if I had my eagle with me. And I says, oh yeah, I've got my eagle with me. And so he asked if I could bring the eagle into the prayer circle. So I did, and put him on a perch in the middle of the prayer circle, and Mr. Jake started the prayers a second time, blessing the ground and blessing my eagle as well. Then when he finished the prayers a second time, and please understand, this is the first time in his 80 plus years he was able to do a blessing with a live eagle. And so that meant a great deal to Mr. Jake. When he finished the prayers the second time, he called me back into the prayer circle and asked if I would please stand in his place and face east, because they say their prayers to the east. And so I stood in his place and I faced east. He stood off to my left side a little bit. He started the prayers a third time, blessing the ground, blessing the eagle and blessing me as well, saying all of the words to the prayer so that I can hear. You don't need glasses. Those are mine. Saying all of the words to the prayer so that I can hear them. No, those, you don't need glasses. You think it's funny, don't you? You think it's so funny. Well, when the prayers were over, Mr. Jake reached up, put his hand on my shoulder, and spent the next few minutes explaining to me what each of the prayers meant. And I felt very honored that he would share not only his language, but his religion with me. When the property dedication ceremony was over, Mr. Jake asked if I could please come to his house that he wanted to visit. So later on that afternoon, I went out to Mr. Jake's home. We sat in his living room, and he told me the story of the eagle. And the story of the eagle was that the eagle was once human, and that the most noble and courageous of the native people are called by the Great Spirit to come sit in council in heaven. And this noble individual said, well, I cannot sit in council because I cannot fly. So the Great Spirit turned him into an eagle. And the eagle has a very special calling. And the calling that the eagle has is to remain on earth by night, collecting the prayers from the people of the nation, you know, the 7,000 feathers, 7,000 prayers. And then by day, ride the currents of warm rising air up into the heavens and deliver the prayers of the Great Spirit. And then to receive all of the blessings from the Great Spirit and bring all the blessings back down to the people of the nation. And then Mr. Jake went on to say that when a Paiute person sees an eagle soaring overhead, they see that eagle as one of the great eagles, and the eagle is watching over them personally, kind of like a guardian angel. And I said, what a beautiful explanation as to why eagles are sacred. And then Mr. Jake went on to say that it's tradition within the Paiute community that when you receive your first blessing, that you receive a Paiute name. Now please understand, guys, I'm not the Dancing with Wolves type. You know, I love the Paiute people. They are the sweetest people on the planet. Their belief system and mine's a little bit different. The name that Mr. Jake gave me, please understand my English tongue does not twist that well. The Paiute language is beautiful, but it's very complex. But the English translation for the name that Mr. Jake gave me is the Healer of Eagles, or the Healer of Angels. Well, Mr. Jake has passed away. And at his funeral, they talked about Mr. Jake coming back one day as one of the great eagles to watch over the Paiute people. And after his funeral was over, I had a very sweet elderly Paiute woman come up to me and say, Mr. Tyner, if you ever have the opportunity to care for Mr. Jake, would you please let us know? And so I guess that's my job for the rest of my life, is to continue caring for the critters. And if one of the eagles that comes into the rescue center happens to be Mr. Jake, and please don't ask me how I'll know because I have no idea. But I'm sure if it is Mr. Jake, I will know. And then I need to let the elders of the Paiute tribe know that Mr. Jake is with me. So I guess that's my job. Which brings me to my next little subject. This Saturday, 5 o'clock at the sea overlook above Cedar City, I will be releasing a golden eagle just like this back to the wild. And you're all invited. If you want to come up to Cedar City and watch a big, beautiful eagle that we rescued go back into the sky where it belongs, please come up to Cedar City. And you can go on, grab a flyer, you can go on our website and get more information about that. Eagle questions that I can answer for you.
Martin, why is the eagle called a golden?
The reason he is called a golden eagle is the same reason for the bald eagle to be bald eagle. The bald because of the white head. The golden eagle has golden feathers in the back of its head. And so that's where he gets the name golden from. Otherwise, he's obviously quite brown, but the golden feathers on his head. Yes?
Do you bathe him? Does he bathe himself? Does he like to do that?
Yeah, you know those little kiddie pools? That's his bath pad. And he loves to take a bath. And you know, in the middle of the winter, it can be really cold. Break the ice off the thing, turn the hose on, and fill it up. And he'll jump in when it's ice cold and splash around and have a great time. So he does love the cold. Other questions I can answer for you guys?
How much, and females are quite.
Females are about a third larger. So males range from 5 to 9 pounds, and the females range from about 9 to about 13.
And their color's basically the same.
Color's the same. Yes.
You mentioned smaller birds ate 6 to 7 ounces a day. How much does he eat?
He eats a pound of animal a day. So a pound of jackrabbit, you know, a pound of quail, a pound of rats. Does that make sense? Whole animals. About a pound a day. Yes.
Does he lose feathers? And if he does, do you collect them up keep them? Or-
Well, actually, all birds molt. All birds lose feathers and grow new ones every year, and he's no exception to that. And yes, we do put them in a big box. When I get a big box full of feathers, the feathers are shipped to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Feather Lab, where they are distributed to the Native Americans. Basically, even I am not allowed to wear an eagle feather in my hat. It's, you know, it's very much against the law to do that. I have eagle feathers because I got the whole bird. But yeah, when I get a box full, then I ship them off.
Martin, how did you get Scout?
Scout, a farmer up in Wyoming, was threatening to shoot him. And I was called in by the federal government to go rescue him before he got shot. So this is a full-grown wild eagle. It took me a week to set up a bait station where I could bring him in and trap him. So he was very much full-grown wild when I had to trap him and remove him from the situation. Yes?
Okay, we talked about the size comparison of a male-female in the falcons and the hawks. What about eagles?
Same thing, the females are a third larger than the males.
Whoa,
And so this is a male.
You would
But this is a big
think-
male. But yes, this is
oh, that's a big male?
it's a big male. He's 8 pounds, and about the largest male goes to 9 pounds. And the females start at about 9 pounds, go to 13 pounds.
Holy smokes.
When they mate, do they stay together all the time, or just?
Well, they do pair bond for life, but when the nesting season is over, they kind of go their separate directions. They don't really associate with each other, but come about mid-January, they come back to the nesting season, and they go through a very, very elaborate courtship to reestablish the bond again.
Is that typical of all birds of prey?
Yes. Yes.
Lifespan?
Lifespan, if all goes well, in the wild, they will live about 20 years. In captivity, if all goes well, they'll live more than 40 years.
And how old is he?
He's 18. So we've got another 20 plus years together, he and I.
So Martin, how long did it take for you to establish this kind of relationship with them? I mean, very friendly. And like, did it take a while?
Well, I talk about a little bit in my book. I'm severely dyslexic. Okay, I'm severely dyslexic. As a child going through school, I remember sitting at a parent-teacher conference and the teacher telling my mother, "We've done all we can. Martin will never learn to read, but as long as there's work for ditch diggers, he'll be fine." Okay, they didn't know in the late 50s and early 60s, they didn't know what being dyslexic was, and they didn't have anything that they could help us with. Fortunately, I had a very wise grandmother who's a retired school teacher, and she saved my life. And we talk about that in my book. But what I discovered as a child, severely dyslexic, short, I wasn't by any means an athlete, and Lord knows you don't want me to sing. I have no talent. And I always wondered why everybody had, something special they could do, and there's just nothing I could do, that no talent whatsoever. Well, I found my talent, and being dyslexic is part of it. People who are dyslexic have a slightly higher IQ than normal, and people who are dyslexic have a much higher situational awareness than normal as well. And it's that high situational awareness that allows me to work with wild animals. I can see their moves. I'm very much aware of their temperaments and how things are going. And so I've been able to work with wild animals that nobody else can touch. And I can take a full-grown wild eagle like this one right out of the sky and have him flying free and hunting with me in about a month. I can have a wild eagle sitting in my glove like this in about 5-10 minutes.
And how long?
Sitting on the glove like this in about 5 or 10 minutes.
But you don't put him close to your face.
Of course I do. I start off this close with a wild eagle because it is I trust you, and I'm comfortable with you. That allows the eagle to go, oh, he's not being threatened.
Would you come to my house and work with a Patagonian? And Joey?
That was my job, was training the wild macaws and things in bush gardens. All the prothom birds they would send to me.
Do you also do owls?
I do native Utah wildlife, but in the birds of prey, yeah, I do a lot of owls. Absolutely. Any other questions before we call it a night, guys? Yes.
Does he get quills? Sometimes you'll see captive birds like parrots, and they get these quills, and you can go and you can squish them to help. Does
Well, actually, let me tell you what that is. They're not quills.
or well,
Yeah, what the quill is the end of the feather that goes inside the cuticle, inside the body. That's the quill. What you see there is the protein shaft from the feather's growth. It's called a blood feather. And if you're not careful with that protein shaft, if you can peel it off if the feather's fully grown. But if the feather's not fully grown, what you end up doing is pinching the blood, and you can damage the feather or even break it. The bird can bleed. And so, you have to be very careful. But yet, all birds get that.
do you help with that?
For the most part, if the bird is healthy, you don't have to. Some birds in captivity, especially if there's genetically not a good specimen, they'll have molting problems. But no, he's a pest.
We have Cooper's Hawks that nest every year in our front yard.
Sure.
And the female has one feather that's missing. And
Yes.
it's been that way for the several years that she's been in our yard.
Yeah.
And that's how we recognize her.
Yeah, and let me tell you what happened. If a feather, now with quail and pigeons and prey species birds, the feathers are meant to fall out. And so if a hawk grabs them and they end up with a fistful of feathers and the bird flies away. Does that make sense? With the predatory birds, the feathers are far better adhered into the cuticle, and they're not meant to be pulled out. And so if that hawk got a feather ripped out either by another predator or something else, that if the cuticle is damaged, the feather will never grow back. And so it'll be that way for the rest of its life.
And I recognize her from now on.
Sure.
Do they have a problem with ravens? There seem to be ravens that bother our hawks in our yard.
Ravens bother everybody. Yes, they bother everybody. I watched a raven one day, because I have bald eagles up where I live. They come in the wintertime. And I watched a bald eagle flying along, and a raven was dive bombing it. And the raven would dive, and the eagle would turn up, put its feet up, trying to grab the raven, and the raven would pitch up. And then as soon as the eagle rolled itself back up straight, it would dive again. And it was just watching this out my front door, I'm going, that poor eagle, that raven is just really being a real problem. And I watched the raven pitch up a little bit higher than normal, and then come down a little bit faster, and the eagle rolled over and went, grab! Rolled back over and flew off with the raven.
Oh.
You only make that mistake once. Well, thank you guys. Please grab a flyer. And if you'd like to walk down the please help walk out.
Just kind of think about it, just a donation to his cause, okay? How much is it, Liz?
Is it money right?
$20 donation to the book.
Yep. Because if you ever go up, please come. Sometimes if you want to, I go up, it's small fence. Just a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
some of our folks got the opportunity to release one of these golden eagles. It was just a wonderful day. But when you go visit him, you can see Martin and Susan have put their whole life into this. So if you please help them out, that would be wonderful. All right? Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Before everyone goes,
I know.
this is something that I understand happens in Nevada. So there's a raffle. I don't know what the whole purpose of raffle is.